But without further ado, I want to go ahead and take the time to introduce you to our special guest appearance, Ms. Perez Owino. She is an award-winning writer, director, whose debut of this beautiful movie, Bound, Africans versus African Americans, played in festivals around the world, winning her the Women in Film Lena Sharp Award at the Seattle International Film Festival, and also the Audience Award for Best Documentary at the Pan-African Film Festival in Los Angeles. Her writing credits include Seasons of Love, which was produced by Taraji P. Henson, received really a wonderful NAACP Image Award nomination for Outstanding Writing of Television Movie. And also her Once Upon a Time in Africa, which is currently in pre-production. Ms. Perez is presently developing a future based on her screenplay, The Basket Weaver, which won her New York Whipped Meryl Streep Writers Lab competition, and also several other TV projects with Bolanti, Gourmand, and also Heartbeat Productions. Please, with warm welcome, let me introduce you to Ms. Perez Owino, who is really a great actress and a successful writer, director. Please, warm welcome to Perez Owino. Take
Hi.
it over.
That's always a mouthful, isn't it? Oh God, this business, I tell you.
I tell you.
It's
great. It's awesome. We're just happy to see your face. All I should have said, let's get her face on here, right? You're beautiful. Welcome, sister. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much.
We have been diving into the whole relationship issues between Africans and African Americans, and of course, Afro-Caribbeans.
Yes.
I want to throw it back to you, given your movie, and without giving up a whole lot, because I still want folks to go out and see it. It's beautiful. Yes. I have tears in my eyes. I've watched it twice, and I can't get enough. I really can't get enough.
Thank you so much.
Really, thank you for doing such a wonderful movie. And this has been in my heart, which was part of why I started this show. So to see that someone had put it into a documentary movie, it's like, oh, you can see where I'm jumping up and down. But let's piggyback to what we were talking about before, because I know your movie dealt a lot about it too, which is the stereotypes as an African and now also as an African American. Can you share with the audience what are the stereotypes that you have heard, and how can we turn it around and make something positive? I know you dealt a little bit about, but don't give up so much.
Yeah. At least for me, some of the stereotypes I dealt with when I came here, I think the one that is most common that we always hear is that Africans are arrogant. And we get that a lot. And I remember once someone said that to me. I said, oh, Africans are arrogant, Africans are arrogant. And I remember sitting down with them and I said, is it that they're arrogant or that they're self-assured? What's really is it that you're talking about? Is self-aware, self-assured, or is it arrogance? Because you also have to see the lens with which arrogance was defined to you. What does it mean to be arrogant? And usually in some cases, you see that arrogance is such a gray area because it goes from people who are, in an essence, how can I put it, prideful, and then people who are proud of who they are. There's a difference. You can get confused about which it is. And so I met a South African American friend, and I said, how about consider that Africans are not Africans are not, they don't think they're better than you. They just know that they're good enough. And so that they're good enough to be in the presence of anybody, regardless of race, and be able to compete. And that what you're seeing is pride, maybe what you're seeing as you people think you're all that, maybe. And I remember saying this, I said, maybe you should think you're all that too. Because this may just be a reflection of who you are supposed to be. And you were told you're not. Because I can walk into any room and don't you dare tell me I can't do something because then I'm going to do it times 10. Because the idea of I cannot because of my skin color does not exist for me. Right. That I don't know what that means. That makes no sense to me. Now I'm a Luo. If you come at me as like, oh, you're a Luo, this, okay. If you're talking about my skin color, I'm like, you lost me there. And so there's this whole idea with language. Whose language are you using to define yourself? Because if you're telling me I'm prideful, that's English. What does that mean? If you come to the Luo people, my tribe of people, there's this thing called Pakruok, which means when you go into a space, you have to speak about yourself as if it's poetry. And you see African Americans do it a lot in rapping, whereas I'm the goat. That's an African thing. If you've read Chinwe Lebechi, you go in there and you say, let me tell you who I am and what I have done. My feet don't touch the ground. My back never touches the ground because I'm a Congo. I'm a Lindsay. That's all part of who we are. So when that is stripped from you and you're told to be less than who you are, when you see someone walk into that space and says, let me show you who I am. Hey, you have no clue. Then now you think that that's arrogance. That's Africa. That's all that is. And that's on the flip side, what I would hear a lot is this back talking about African Americans and how they've not taken advantages of the situations and all that stuff. And for that group of Africans, and now I would always tell them, okay, you have to understand. Now I take them back to Africa. You're an African in another person's home. And what is the one thing you always taught about when you go to somebody else's home? You're representing your own family, your own name, and you go in there with respect. You have to understand upon whose shoulders you stand. The road that your brothers walked, because they are, to make this way for you, they're still walking that road. They're carrying crosses you don't have to carry. But you must be aware of that cross and figure out how you can help. Because if you're then used as an African to explain how, well, this Black person is doing this, how come this one is not? I always tell people, when I go into a space and they want to start comparing me, I said, hold up. Don't compare me. I said, don't compare me with Jay-Z. Don't even compare me with Beyonce. That woman is carrying a cross that I have never had to carry. Compare me with Bill Gates, because where I came from, I was the supreme. Compare me with who is the number one over here. Don't use me to then put my brother down, because my brother is carrying a cross I don't even understand. And one thing that I say, and this is just for me, I don't like when people call me, when people try to put the African American label on me, because I say this, for you to do that, for you to base the African American experience just on my skin, you're undermining that experience. You're undermining the cross that they carry, that you think that every Black person carries that cross. No, there's a cross African Americans carry, there's a cross Jamaicans carry, there's a cross Haitians carry, there's a cross. If you go to South America, that's a whole different kind of racism for Black people in Latin America. It's a whole different kind of racism for Black people in Saudi Arabia. And I just think it is very important for us to stand in solidarity and in acknowledgement that we all carry different crosses, and that mine should never ever be used to limit somebody else's. That I completely, and that's why I made Bound. And it's made specifically, you've watched it, so that it's not just let's talk about how different we are and but it's also talk about how similar we are, but also to understand each other's cross. And I know people were talking about, oh, we needed to have the Caribbean American, and we wanted to, but there was so much material. We had to simplify it for now, with the belief that somebody else is going to pick up this cross and continue the conversation. But I just wanted to start from a place that was most familiar to me, which was an African in an African American space, because that is really the space we are welcomed into first. By just as we are seen, we are immediately assumed that we are African American. So it's in that space that we're initially welcomed into, wanted or not. That's the space we will occupy. Then you open your mouth and you have an accent, then now you have a whole other lot of mess to deal with. Now you're just an immigrant. It just becomes this whole thing. But to understand fundamentally that I believe, Perez Owino believe, that when people were taken from the coast of Africa, there were those who remained behind and told their children, your cousin was taken, please sit here. When they come back, I need you to welcome them home. I fundamentally believe that in my core, and that us coming to each other finally, it's been hundreds of years, but we still owe our responsibility to the ancestors who asked us to stand guard and watch and welcome them when they come home. That I fundamentally believe. It's a struggle. It's not easy because there's a lot of tension in there, but we can do it. So that's my 2 cents. I think I've answered several questions in there, so there should be no more questions.
You think you're gonna get away with that? I doubt it.
I know. Oh my God, she did not annulate. Yes, there's the African.
Exactly, she did it.
There's the African. In Africa, in Kenya, we go. That's how you finish it. That's who we are, man.
Remarkable, remarkable. Awesome.
That's who we are, yes.
Let's go ahead and have Miss Felicity pose our first question, please. And be mindful so we can be able to share the time with other people to also get their questions across.
I wanted to just say thank you so much for that explication. It really, what you said was what I was trying to say. I'm new to being welcomed home, but I feel that being part of the prayer talk has been, like you just said, it's like my cousins welcoming me home. And it has been a part of this process of learning what my African background means and seeing where that fits in my persona. And I just couldn't agree with what you said 100% about being called arrogant, you know, is really the confidence. And I think it is a particular pain point for African Americans, because we feel like some people feel like they have to be a certain way in certain spaces in order to make other people feel comfortable. And when they see Africans not being that way, it makes them angry. But the anger, as you said, we have to just kind of go inside and say, didn't you consent to acting a certain way? Like, you didn't have to act that way, and this is proof. So anyway, I just wanted to say there was so much confirmation in there. You gave me better language for what I was trying to say in terms of feeling that I'm learning, that I've learned more about myself. And just as if someone goes to therapy and they learn about how their past has impacted them and they become a stronger person, that is what's happening for me and what I'm inviting more and more African Americans into. I'm continuously talking about it because it's very, very powerful. And so thank you for being here. Thank you for the movie. And Bibi, thank you for having this guest.
Thank
today.
you. Thank you so much. Yeah. Ms. Perez, you have anything to add, although she's just commenting?
Oh no, this is a journey for all of us. I mean, we are trying to make up 500 years. And our struggle, our relationship is unique. I think it's most unique because I always tell people when I look at African Americans in the United States, I always call them the conscience of this country, because every time African Americans have asked this country to make a change, it has always been for the better. It has never been for the worse. It's always been for the better. So I've always seen them as the consciousness of this state, the conscience of this nation. But we have to understand that there's a lot we're dealing with. And even as Africans, I remember when I was interviewing, this didn't make the documentary, but as I was interviewing one of the professors, I said, there's this statement when I think Africans mostly say it, that African Americans are not African enough. And the professor looked at me and said, what is African anyway? Because if you think about what colonialism did, is colonialism came and erased the part of Africa that it didn't like and allowed you to maintain what it did like. So what does a complete African look like? And we've lost that a bit. But what's funny is if you want to understand African spirituality, surprisingly enough, you go to Cuba. You know, you go to Haiti. That's where it lives. I mean, I met a gentleman from Nigeria and I was asking him about Ifa, and he said to me, I don't deal with that juju voodoo stuff. And I was just like, oh that's sad. But I think there's a lot of who we are that's left there in the spirituality of Africa. And by the way, I was reading this book called African Spirituality and Philosophy. It's very important, I think, for Africans to read that, because we begin to understand ourselves very differently. We begin to understand that Africans don't have the concept of time. You ever wonder why you're always late? We don't do that. We don't do that. Africans have a sense of, like, you know how when somebody says, I'm going to come and see you in the morning, that's between 6 a.m. and noon. So if you're sitting there waiting at 9 p.m. and you get all your feelings, and that's all on you. We don't have those kind of rigid things about time. But also Africa doesn't have a sense of the future as the way it is in the Western world, which future is forward. Africans never used to do that. Our future is behind us. Our future is behind us. Your ancestors, that's where your future exists. Very fascinating. It was a very fascinating book written by an African African spirituality and I would just recommend, if you ever want to understand yourself or get a better understanding of who you are and some of the choices you make in your life.
What's the title?
It's called, I'm not in my house, it's called Africa, oh Jesus, it's called African,
okay. I could
I'll find it.
Send it to them later.
Yeah. It will open your mind about, you'll begin to understand yourself on a very different level.
Thank God.
African.
Awesome. Let's move to the next person who has a question, and I know it was Miss Amara, who is also here with us. What is your question, Miss Amara? And you can go ahead and lower your hand.
No, I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay.
I think
You're coming. Okay, Mr. Muyamba, please.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Let me do that quickly. So one of the
okay.
Yeah. Thanks. So one of the questions I think I may have to Ms. Owina about her movie, and not even a movie, just I think what you had probably come across when it's because you basically took the journey of trying to figure out what's happening between the various. How much does this look like? And as an African specifically, I think for me is my experience is dealing with tribalism.
Yes.
In our own continent. I think sometimes we don't understand that even in the continent, we have issues getting along. We're not one happy family. It's like we found that even without white people here, we have found a way to divide ourselves up even worse. And how much does this resemble? How much does this resemble what we're going through? And then how do we try and, because one of the things I've seen is how do we try and deal with it? Because let me just give this story as an example, is that here in Zambia, we're one of the most tribally linked by marriage. In other words, every single child is a child of two tribes. Almost every child in this country is a child of two tribes. But when election season comes about, the tribes hate each other. You know, this is unfortunately what starts to happen. So how do we try and get this? I've got my views on it. I want to hear yours based on the experience.
So first thing is there's a statement you made that just made me go, my spirit just went whoop. And you said, even without the white man, we have found a way to divide ourselves. What is Zambia?
I know exactly what you're talking about. It wasn't there before they came.
There's a difference if you look at, and I'm going to use an example of something that happened when I went to Sweden. And I went to Sweden and there was this group of Afro-Swedes, they're called Afro-Svenska. These are all children of parents who've immigrated to Sweden. And there was a big, it was very boisterous in there. So it was all these kids and then there were all these Swedes. Now, if you've known Swedes, this is a very homogeneous society, like really ultra-white. And so you have these kids in there just agitated because the Swedes are not, because they think they're Swedish. They're Swedes, but the Swedes are like, no, you're not Swede. So I'm sitting on this stage. I'm not prepared for this, by the way, because this is new to me. I never been to Sweden before. And I'm sitting there and this girl is asking me, like, I don't know who I am. I don't know. I'm so confused because, you know, I'm Swede, but the country will not allow me to declare myself Swede. And we think we're Swedes. And so she's looking at me. She looks like me and you. And so I asked her, well, where's your mother from? And she said, Uganda. I said, what do you eat? She said, Bagandan food. And I said to her, what's wrong with being Bagandan?
Exactly.
And the room didn't like that. So there was all this screaming and it's again, I get back to language. And I had to get her to understand that Uganda did not exist until colonialism. But for the Swedes, they're Swedish. Their language and their country is all part of their racial identity. We don't have that. So we start colliding linguistically because we don't have the same thing. What is a Kenyan? I don't know what the heck that is. You know, I'm a Luo. When the elections begin, all the Luos are like, yeah, you know, we're the smart ones. You know, we are proud because Obama was half Luo. Yes, we drop that everywhere we go because it's like this thing we are proud of. But that's because we as a people, we can reduce ourselves to that small clan nucleus. We still can. How many years of colonialism? How many years? There's no African country that's 100 years out of colonialism. Me, you, we are first generation. Children born out of colonialism. Our parents are probably born during colonialism.
Or before colonialism.
Yeah, before. So they're still, that vibration is still happening for us. The idea of liberty for African nations, I don't think the idea of liberty has fully been realized, because every African country, somebody name me one African country that has a benevolent leader. One, just one. We don't have that. We're still agitating to understand, what does freedom mean for us? We don't know. We still have our borders. They're still there. So Britain knows where its colonies begin and end. France knows where its colonies begin and end. What does liberation look like for Africa? We have never discussed that. So of course we're going to agitate like this, because there's a part of us that still wants to be free. We just don't know what it looks like. We don't know. We're just like, I want to govern myself, but I'm in this country, I need to be governed, but we don't, but you know, this. So as a collective, Africa needs to figure out, maybe in its little pods, we need to figure out, what does democracy look like for an African nation? Maybe what we do is we not do this stupid parliamentary nonsense from the United Kingdom or the Senate, these things that just make no sense in the context of who we are as historically as a people. We're the oldest group of people, and we're trying to get the newest and the youngest form of political government. It makes no sense. We are people who have been tried and through history, and we're taking things that are brand new. What is capitalism? It's collapsing, but here we go. You know, let me give you an example. Growing up as children, the one thing your mother would put on your face and you hated was coconut oil. It was in your hair, it was in your face, it was everywhere. And you'd be like, I hate this, I want Nivea. I want oil of Olay. Fast forward now, what is the West selling you? Oh, coconut oil. You see what I'm talking about? It's we were people who had realized some stuff, and then now we've gone back and reverted now to what the children are telling us to do. And it just makes no sense. You know, capitalism is not going to work. It's collapsing in the West, but here we are in Africa. So we've lost that sense of identity, that sense of self, that sense of what matters. And until we get that, we will continue to struggle. My father came to visit me, and he had just gone to visit my brother in Miami. My brother's girlfriend is Afro-Colombian, so he'd been jumping. And my father said this to me. He said, why is it that everywhere I go, Black people are always struggling? And then he answered his own question. He said, I think it's time for us to stop following and start leading. That's the problem.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Let me get one more question into you. I think we have a couple, but Dr. Gorham DK, who is one of our panelists, has a question for you too.
Yeah, well,
you can lower your hand.
I mean, the Census Bureau called many of us Caribbean Americans here. Mm-hmm. And I like the way how you intellectually bring out the whole idea of the stereotypes. You know, because in Jamaica, many of us who have roots in Africa, like myself, mm-hmm. Africa has always had a perception, whether as perceived by our colonialists or those in media or those trying to raise funds for Africa, as the poor of the poorest, those that are suffering, those with fly pitching on the skin with Ethiopia and all of that. So when anything about Africa comes up, it's negative across mm-hmm. the Caribbean. And being a part of African American churches, that same negativity exists. And even as I engage with African American historical Black colleges and so forth, that negativity exists in terms of how we are being perceived. It is through my own family connection as an Igbo from Nigeria and engaging with family, I learn about kings, I learn about traditional rulers, I learn about the richest people on the planet, Black folks on the planet, being African, the most progressive people in the United States who are in the Black immigrant community, medically, science, technology, etc., are Africans. And there's just so much greatness in us. The question that I have for you is, okay, I mean, I have some opinions that, yes, we need more engagement. We need to go to more African events. We need to have more collaboration. We need to tell our own story, which is why we want to have African Immigrant Heritage Month in the US. But the question is, how do we become more indigenized as a multicultural African community? I am seeking to be more indigenized. I am becoming more indigenized. It's easier for me because of connection with my African family. But how can the Caribbean, Black American, Africans living in Asia, Latin America, how can we become more indigenized and get more connected with our sense of self and operation? As you talk about, we are in the we are in post-colonial period. How our own system of government and run, how can we connect with that? That would be my question.
So when you ask how can we be indigenized, I don't think I'm clear as to what you mean by that. Can you break that down a little bit?
How can we become more connected to our sense of self, our own history, our own culture, our own traditions that has been cut off by Europeanism and slavery and the false impression of the media and the negative history that has been written, a history that has been written about us by others and not by ourselves?
You know what's happening right now? And the sad thing is that it happens in spurts, but you know, we take the wins where we can. Is at this point in time, I don't know if Africa as a continent itself has understood its worth and its strength yet. So what we are dealing with now is that we have to use other people's mouthpieces to kind of wake up the sleeping giant. You know what I mean? There's a problem, and I don't know how many African countries this is, but I think it's beginning to change. I think every generation moves us 10 years ahead, because if you look at the younger generation of Africa right now, a lot of them are really celebrating Africa made. It has to originate in Africa. It has to be a celebration of Africa. I mean, Beyonce's walking around in Kente and, you know, Yoruba. I mean, who knew? 10 years ago, you said you put on something like that, they'd tell you you're too colorful. But now, you know, Viola Davis is on the red carpet. Now we have Black Panther. So there's spaces in each industry. We have a responsibility. I can speak for my industry. I know my industry right now is becoming very, very pro. We are going to push the stories from our perspective because we want our people to see themselves the way they see themselves, and to see them, for the world to see them the way we see us. You know what I mean? So we are pushing in that space. And as we know, change takes time. There's few of us, but I think there's enough to at least start to make a difference in the narratives that go out there. And I believe that narratives are important, because considering the fact that we as people of the diaspora come from a very oral society. So storytelling is very important to us. We put a lot into storytelling. So if you go out and you're telling these stories, that helps. But then also there's individual responsibility. There's individual curiosity that's going to also help. That moves us also a lot faster. Instead of waiting for Issa Rae or, you know, or Viola Davis or, you know, God damn it, his name is so hard to spell. So sometimes I just keep forgetting. I'm trying to throw some African directors' names out there. Instead of waiting for them, because that takes about a year, 2 years to come out. You have the time.
Host, can I join issues, please?
Yeah, 1 second, please. When she finished, I'll bring you in on that.
Okay.
This is Dr. Olatunji. Go ahead.
Yes. Then there's that personal responsibility, because if you went and did the history and you went and searched for yourself, then that also moves you as an individual forward. And then what you share with your community, it starts in very small spaces. It starts with the individual and then with the people around you. And then there's also the big spaces where you have Hollywood coming into play. You have the education system coming into play. You have people who are marching and saying, we want more of this in our education system. You have, it's so many different avenues, so many different vehicles to get us to that end. But it always begins with the individual's own thirst. It begins with your own thirst, your own drive, your own need to fully realize who you are. Because we can throw all the movies we want out there, but if you're not interested in where you came from, you're not going to go watch this stuff. right? So if you as an individual are not curious, then we're just hitting our heads against the wall. So that's where it always begins. Are you curious enough?
Yes, and to one more last question, and that's it, you guys, and then we'll be able to go on to the next within our prayer. We're still within time. Another prayer from brother from Zambia, all the way from Zambia, brother Munyamba Mutwala, please.
Sorry, this is more at I know this is just a bit off the cuff, but this is more at brother DK from the Caribbean there. I just wanted to say something that I wanted to say also last week, is that I, as a young Zambian, when I was about 8 years old, one of the things that drove my identity as a person and made me really love myself was oddly the West Indian cricket team. I love those guys. I love Brian Lara. I love, right now, Chris Gale has been my icon. I even have a shirt here. And I've followed those guys since I've been 8. And the reason is that because those guys played that sport their way. They tried to play it the way the sport was played, but they said, we have our own Caribbean flair and style. And then they dominated that sport. They were the longest running best team of any sport. For 15 years, they were undefeated in the test match arena. And that they petrified some of the white teams. There's this one video of them going back to England and beating England, and they said the slaves have come back to conquer the master. It's this documentary called Babylon on Fire, and I wanted to know that you shouldn't be afraid of even the Caribbean history. Look at the impact. I've never been to the Caribbean. I'm dying to come there because of that, but because what those guys did with who they were and represented who they were, they touched a kid in Zambia who made me believe black can do whatever, black can do anything he wants. Nobody can tell me I can't play cricket. Nobody can tell me I can't be an ace economist. Nobody can tell me anything. And I was inspired by a bunch of black guys who went to one of the worst situations there in the Caribbean and came out of it and dominated a sport. And seeing Brian Lara, I watched him score that. I watched Brian Lara score that 375 against England. I watched him score that 400 again against England 10 years later. And those are the most touching moments of my life, because you represent, as a group, you represented who you were so much that it resonated and moved me here. So don't think that it's only that side, this side touching that side. You guys can do a lot even here, because that made me, I like to say it's that made me who I am. It played a strong role in making me the strong and capable person who I am today. So I just wanted you to add, even all that way in the Caribbean, that you guys even have an impact here.
And you make a really valid point, because who does not remember the Jamaican bobsled team? Who does not remember like every single time we were in Africa and when we were watching the Olympics, who wasn't black, who wasn't cheering for the black players of the United States team? I dare you to find one. No matter where you saw a black face, that's the person you cheered for. So we have always been celebrating each other, regardless of where we are. Because when you are black excellence in the United States, and you are black excellence in Africa, and you're black excellence in Latin America, come on, Pele, come on now. Places we've never been.
Yes.
But you see the excellence. Who is not proud of Beyonce? Who? Like when the Bay walks in, like I have never listened to a Beyonce, but she walks in, you're like, Igbo, and I don't know, we used to do this in Zambia, but we used to do this in Kenya a lot. We'd watch the NBA games and people would fight to get the team players to be called. No, that is my tribe. No, Michael Jordan was a Luo. You could not tell any Kenyan Michael Jordan was not a Luo. Like we fought to bring, like there was this celebration of just black excellence, no matter where it came from. We identified with it. We were celebrating each other. We have always been celebrating each other,